Well, this certainly was a finale. Couple this with The Walking Dead coming to its own conclusion just 2 days ago, there was a question that had been plaguing my mind in recent weeks when I realised that they were both closing at the same time. And I think I'll have an answer for it by the end of this review, and that was, which one did it better in terms of an uprising?
You're all I've ever wanted.
And that's how we do that.
It obviously can't be disputed that they are different shows, and the genres certainly separate them, but the final season of The Walking Dead was fighting a similar situation that the galaxy is in Andor, an oppressive, totalitarian regime that seeks to rule over everyone within its reach. Not to worry though, I won't be dragging The Walking Dead into this too deeply, as the topic of this video is about one thing: Andor.
Well, that's good to know.
Now, in my opinion, depending on which side of the fence you fell on regarding the series, meaning if you stuck around long enough to realise it or not, I don't think it can be argued at this point that visually this is one of the best Star Wars live-action shows they've done.
Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah! Oh! Oh!
With only 2 scenes in this whole episode that felt particularly noticeable in terms of its CGI, the rest of it, however, was on point. The whole series has been on point.
Nailed it.
Set dressing, set design, the architecture, the effort put into making Ferrix in particular feel as populated and dense as it is, made for a truly rewarding experience by the end, and throughout the whole series, it was on levels that are otherworldly compared to the likes of Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett. As they made Andor feel as grounded as it did, and it was fantastic to witness, and I personally want to see more of it. You have no excuse anymore, Disney. This is the type of shit that fans deserve. Sure, they tried it with Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett to a degree, and The Mandalorian certainly had its own successes, but at times where they were on location for episodes throughout Andor, it just added a little more range and depth to what you see in Star Wars, and certainly felt a little more akin to the original trilogy where they were limited by the constraints of the time. They limited themselves, and it provided a far more engaging experience that I honestly don't recall feeling at times with, say, The Mandalorian. As much as I love that show and appreciate some of the lengths they went to for it, I personally would prefer they do more on-location filming. Fuck me, they're throwing away enough money at the shit coming out from Marvel right now. Why not split the pot a little bit?
Don't give me excuses. Give me results.
The sound design, the scores that played over a lot of the series was fantastic, and I've had my gripes throughout the show, and certainly accused it of being particularly slow at times, but I know, for me at least, from the escape from Aldhani up to now, have been vastly more entertaining than what we began with. Anyway though, let's get into what you truly wanted to hear from this, and that's my thoughts on the finale of Andor's first season.
This is where the fun begins.
The strength that this episode possesses alone outweighs almost everything else this entire season has given us, but it wouldn't feel that way, of course, without the rest of the season. This one episode just allowed you to enjoy what happened within it, with a couple of moments designed for shock value that worked with the understanding of what we had for those characters, like Cyril's ambitions turning into love and saving Miro, Brasso proving to be an extremely capable fighter, and then obviously the vast array of spies that were bouncing around this episode, and then the reveal of Cinta gutting the ISB officer was just good fun to see. Nothing felt unbelonging to this finale, as it brought all of the characters back to where it began, bookending this series with Andor staying out of the fight to joining the fight, and witnessing that connection that the people of Ferrix possess was a uniquely uplifting moment that got me feeling the feels, particularly the excellent delivery of empowering words given by the late Marva. To witness a spark of rebellion start here, and with everything else Cassian has fought through in this first season, we finally understand what drove him to working with the rebellion. Another tip of the hat to Disney, you've got to give them credit, they made me care about Andor. Though, I think it's unfair to give them the credit when it comes down to Tony Gilroy and the writers who actually understood the intention of the series, and primarily it was to offer a more mature alternative for the fans who don't care for the shows like Bad Batch and Rebels that also take focus on the rebel uprising, but to offer a more weighted experience that you could connect with immediately, lest we forget what it did to help us gather a better understanding of motivations and political engagements that played a factor in Palpatine even receiving the keys to the galaxy to begin with. The character development I felt was pretty sparse, though it gave us enough in terms of Andor, Luthen and Cyril at least, and I was okay with that. Given the spectacle we received, where this whole season had been leading towards, it was refreshing just to get a good bit of action and suspense in a show called Star Wars. The funeral sequence, however, has become one of my favourite moments in live action, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the band essentially carrying the score for the whole episode and generating the tension with the drums becoming more prominent as the scenes went by, to then seeing the emotions on their faces, and once shit got going, the lack of hesitation to rise up against the Empire was quite profound and a really stellar performance from everyone involved.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Secondly, little moments during these events, like the stormtrooper getting yeeted off the bell tower, Brasso kicking the shit out of troopers, the kid throwing the explosive, essentially blowing the fuse that allowed everything to descend into pure chaos after, made for glaring moments that truly stood out from everything else around it. Then finally, the Empire just indiscriminately killing civilians and the heart-pounding action sequences that were involved with it that began with a riot and switched quickly into a battle. It felt real, it was gritty and had authenticity to it, filled in by the twists and turns with who was a spy or not, then to culminate with the visual of Luthen looking over the town as the shadows of the dead were bathed in the fire of their enemies.
I'm not crying, you're crying!
This episode was certainly the best of the season, followed only by episode 9 for me. It delved out the punishment with only a glimmer of hope in the final seconds of Andor approaching Luthen to join him, but was quickly undone when the post-credits scene informed us of what the prisoners were actually doing, which turned out to be connective elements for the dish of the Death Star, almost symbolically connecting Andor with his eventual demise and making the galaxy kill itself in a twisted way. The involvement of everyone and their mothers in this final episode only worked to a degree, as I mentioned, with the Scottish officer in particular being one of those factors that was quite forgettable. Miro felt almost secondary to the officer that was commanding the troops in the town, and I honestly didn't think much of the kid's involvement until the final moments when he was dragged away with Brasso and B2. Given that we got to see this, you'd assume that he'd be coming back in Season 2, however, so I'll be keeping an eye out for him in the next season for involvement. It was awesome to see the shortcomings of the Empire in this moment as a stark reminder that despite the numbers advantage and how they resign themselves to the ideals of authority and rule, that when rebel activity breaks out, it blows up in their face, and it becomes a far more taxing venture to put out the fire. The final 10 seconds or so, we saw Mothma bring her daughter to what is presumably going to become more than an introduction, leaving us with the question of how far will people go in this rebellion to fund it. Coming out the back of this episode, I can't say I'm particularly invested in Val, Cinta, Cyril, or Miro's stories right now. Though I can see their motivations, it's just not an aspect of the series that was particularly engaging for me. But who knows, they won me over with Andor, they might be able to win me in the next season with them. The desperation, the excitement and tension in this was palpable, and has brought me to the conclusion that Andor did it best. The Walking Dead was decent enough, but lacked focus in its final moments, and I was certainly more excited for that conclusion than this, and I loved it, but the last 45 minutes of Andor won me over, and has left me elated for the fact that we have a Season 2. Who'd have thought they'd be able to stick the landing in the end? Congratulations, Disney, 2 out of 4 ain't bad.
Good job. Good job.
If you have skipped out on Andor, I don't blame you, but I would seriously advise you give it another go. It does get better. Most things do in Star Wars.
Comedy.
I think this has established itself as a worthy addition to the Star Wars lore and elevated what we should expect from it, for the simple fact that it did the unthinkable and made you care about a character that had a little over an hour of screen time previously, with little context added to him. Everyone involved did a fantastic job, and I'm truly happy that we have this series now. I was skeptical going into it, but it has turned me. And now my hopes for Season 2 are that we get more involvement from established characters to integrate this fully with the likes of Star Wars Rebels, which, I want to remind you once more, is occurring concurrently with this series. Much like The Mandalorian and Kenobi have brought up events in both Clone Wars, Fallen Order, and Rebels, it's just nice to have those little moments, but that might be a case of self-indulgence from me. That's where I'm going to end it though, everybody. This has been a hell of a journey with Andor. Thank you so much for joining me throughout these reviews. It's meant a tremendous amount and given me a spark that I needed to continue with this channel. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like as it helps get this video out there. Drop a comment down below, let me know what you thought of Andor and how you felt about the finale. Subscribe for more content as I'll be covering the Guardians Holiday Special on Monday, Bad Batch Season 2 in January, Mando Season 3 in February, Secret Invasion in late spring, Ant-Man 3, and so much more in the near future. Until then though everybody, thank you again, take care, and may the Force be with you.